Instead of a regular chapter review, I wanted to point out something huge I've noticed about this chapter and break it down, which is that the Straw Hats are very likely not currently in Elbaf. It is far more likely that they have been shrunk and are being held captive by this quote-unquote sun god character, who we've once actually seen before as a member of the Holy Knights. Now this might sound wild, but let me break it down for you piece by piece. To begin with, it doesn't actually make sense that the Straw Hats are in Elbaf in the first place. Their ship was still sailing to Elbaf the night before, and the Giant's ship, which should cover more ground than the Thousand Sunny due to its size, has actually somehow fallen far behind. So while readers are coming up with all sorts of ideas to resolve this sort of magical teleportation to Elbaf, like maybe a knock-up stream launched them forward, or maybe drunk Nami for some reason did a coup event that somehow launched them so far forward that they ended up deep in Elbaf country, what it actually seems like is this is a classic misdirection by Oda, and Luffy's group of Straw Hats is not actually in Elbaf yet. Because remember, we were never told with any title card or narration text box that the Straw Hats are actually in Elbaf. The only reasons that readers initially assumed that the Straw Hats were now in Elbaf is that the Straw Hats woke up in Viking clothes, in a giant castle made of Legos, with giants outside, and the Yggdrasil tree being referenced. But since then, we've learned that all of those points are not true. That's not the real Yggdrasil tree, those aren't real giants, they're normal-sized humans, the castle is fake, and everyone has just been dressed up in Viking clothes by their captor. The entire setting was specifically crafted to be a fake Elbaf. Now readers for some reason are assuming that once we get out of this fake Elbaf, we will be in the real Elbaf. But there's actually zero reason to think that that should be the case. Because think about it, with this chapter, every piece of evidence that made us initially think that we had somehow ended up in Elbaf was disproven. As Nami herself explicitly pointed out this chapter, we are very possibly being misled in general. There is actually no reason to believe that we are in Elbaf yet. With all other points of evidence eliminated, the only thing left that suggests that this might be the country of the giants is the presence of one and only one mysterious giant, the quote-unquote sun god, and even that is very possibly about to be revealed as the final lie as well, in that this sun god giant is likely not even a real giant, because this supposed giant who has captured the Straw Hats is a character that we have seen before. This character has the exact same design as the Holy Knight that we saw at God Valley. It's exactly the same, down to wielding a staff. The only reason readers aren't assuming it's the same character just yet, and are only pointing out that the Sun God has the same design as that Holy Knight, is because of the perceived size difference. The Holy Knight seemed human-sized, whereas the Sun God that we're seeing right now seems to be a giant, right? Therefore, they must be different characters that just have the exact same design, right? And that right there is the final part of this whole illusion. I'm not saying that this Holy Knight has gigantified itself, as that is San Juan Wolf's Devil Fruit ability, but I am saying that the reverse is very possible. This Holy Knight likely has the Devil Fruit ability to shrink others. Oda even started dropping hints about size alteration this very chapter, as he has Nami take a guess that maybe all the Straw Hats have been gigantified, which is one step away from the truth in that in reality it's reversed. The Straw Hats and everyone else in this kingdom has been shrunk. They have been shrunk by their captor, this Holy Knight, to become miniature playthings in comparison to him, such that this Holy Knight now lords over them as this seemingly gigantic quote-unquote sun god. Remember, the Holy Knights were being mobilized and sent out to sea, so they are officially out and about. And I just want to ask you, what is more likely? That the Straw Hats have somehow, without explanation, teleported far ahead of the other group and ended up deep in Elbaf country, specifically into the lair of this giant sun god who has randomly the exact same design as the Holy Knight we saw before but isn't actually that Holy Knight, or the Holy Knight simply intercepted the Straw Hats while they were sleeping at night and took them prisoner. And this is just the same Holy Knight user we saw before, a Devil Fruit user. All of this also tracks in that I just put out an elaborate theory just last week breaking down why the Holy Knights are very likely set to be the main villains of the Elbaf arc. All evidence already pointed towards that. You can click the link on the side to watch it. And now in the very next chapter, 1128, we get the reveal that the sun god that was being built up is almost definitely one of the Holy Knights that we once saw. This would also explain why the sun god is so huge. Even by giant standards, it is far bigger than a normal giant. It's even larger than Ors. The reality is, it's not that huge. The sun god is a normal-sized human, who has shrunk everyone else to be microscopic in comparison. On top of that, consider all of the animal quote-unquote gods that the Straw Hats have been running into. The rabbit god, the snake god, the crow god, the hedgehog. Go back and look at all of them. Aside from the cat, who seems like an exception, there's nothing really special about any of these animals or their designs. They really just seem like normal animals. All of these animal gods are likely just normal animals, it's just that the Straw Hats and the other citizens of this kingdom have been shrunk to such a small size that they can now be framed as gods. This would also explain the presence and the purpose of these animal gods. If the Holy Knight simply shrunk its captives and placed them in a fake kingdom, then the Holy Knight simply put in some normal-sized animals to keep its captives in check and have them living in fear. The captives of the kingdom all believe this is real, and so they view these regular animals as their gods. And of course, their Holy Knight captor seems like a towering, gigantic sun god. Finally, this could connect one last plot point that readers have wanted to see come together. This current group of Straw Hats that have been separated are notably the Alabasta group, the group of Straw Hats that bonded with Vivi during that arc. Since Vivi has been out and about on the seas, many readers have hoped that she could run into the Straw Hats in some way, particularly the Alabasta group that Vivi knows personally. Now, if the Alabasta Straw Hats were already in Elbaf, then this would be very difficult, considering Vivi and Wapol are still out in the seas and wouldn't necessarily be welcome in the country of the giants. However, if the Alabasta group is actually not yet at Elbaf and is actually still out on the sea, then assuming that they break out of their prison, this then gives them potential to connect that hanging plot point that everyone has been waiting on for them to meet Vivi. I also think this reunion would work best if it was just the Alabasta Straw Hats meeting Vivi first before she meets the rest of the cast, which is why it may have been intentional by Oda to separate the two Straw Hat groups at sea, since having Robin, Frankie, Brooke, Jinbei, Bonnie, Lilith, and the other giant pirates all there as well would have made for a more cluttered scene. So while the Vivi potential isn't necessarily important to the rest of the theory, it is something small and interesting to think about. So it might sound crazy, but you can see why I think there's a good shot that we are not actually in Elbaf yet at all, and instead we've actually begun our encounter with the Holy Knights. I hope you all enjoyed this in place of a normal chapter review. And shoutouts to Movahed Sadeghi for winning last week's chapter prediction contest for correctly guessing that Chopper would rejoin Luffy's group this chapter. If you would like to compete by submitting your chapter predictions, just join every Break Week's Monday stream. And finally, from the voice of the people, my top tier of patrons. Cody says, thoughts on the sloppy mess-ups the last few chapters like Luffy's hat, and if it's something in story or if Oda and his editors somehow missed all of this. I was in the they may be drunk or Loki trickery camp, but not sure how much longer it goes. So I never felt that it was all an illusion or hallucination. I think it might just be a consequence of Oda starting to write the Straw Hats, or draw the Straw Hats with these totally new designs, and because these designs are brand new and Oda's just trying his hand at drawing them regularly, there might be more slip-ups and that he forgets that, oh, I designed Luffy with this right here, that right here, things like that, or I need to include this or that. I think it's just a consequence of brand new, fresh designs for the arc. So that's my thought process, but maybe it turns out to be an additional illusion or hallucination, but the Straw Hats do seem to be in character so far. So I don't think we're dealing with fake Straw Hats. So that's all for this video, and watch out for next Tuesday's video.